Okay, so for character modeling, there's usually two different types of modeling. There are box modeling techniques and segment modeling techniques. I usually utilize segment modeling, and I usually do it more specifically is to be kind of like a form of strip modeling, where basically I try to build out each part as accurately to the actual dimensions of the character as possible, whether it's the facial features or the body itself. And I try to only add the details that I need as I need them, and I don't try to keep all those pieces connected. Whereas generally, if you're doing box modeling, there's a tendency to make mistakes and to overutilize polygons to try to get all these pieces that don't need to be attached to actually be attached to each other. Particularly since in real life, most of these pieces are not actually attached. Right, like the character's clothes, boots, like the jacket, the hair, all that stuff is not like part of the body of the character in the same way that you would think, right? Like even though hair is coming out of my head, it's actually a separate entity. It's not actually an extension of the body of my body. So that's usually generally a good thing to be mindful of. But we're gonna start with the face. And you can do this either with curves and extruding curves or whatever might suit your purposes. But in general, I find that it's a good idea to just work with polygons, and that's usually what I try to focus on. Is I try to make planes and then extrude edges of the planes and then continue to expand those as I go. So, okay, so I'm gonna make sure, by the way, I have all my templates in my my template layer. I want to make sure that template layer is a reference so that I don't actually utilize it. I'm also going to use make sure that my scale layer is actually just turned off because I don't need to see it right now. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a plane, polygon plane. This plane, and just sort of pull up. Switch to the rotate tool real quick, and I can rotate it. Since I have discrete rotate turned on, it's actually pretty easy to do that. And then I'm going to make sure that my plane subdivision segments are 1 and 1. And for right now, the only thing that I want to do is I want to basically, I'm going to use this, I'm going to assign another material to this. So I'm going to assign favorite material Lambert for right now, and I'm just going to call this character base matte. And I'm going to increase the transparency on this one a little bit. You won't see it too clearly until... Okay, so I have my plane here. I can adjust the transparency a little bit. Really, I just want to be able to see my template through the shape that I'm working with. And so I'm going to basically do a simple initial outline of the eye utilizing this plane shape. And I can see a little bit of the eyelid here, so it seems to make sense to sort of follow that. Then if I hold down the Shift key while I have an edge selected, it's really easy to extrude. As of Maya 2018, they actually added that in fairly recently. And so what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to go for like extremely broad strokes. So I'm going to go ahead and drag each of these out to kind of like the main points around the eye. I'm going to extrude this one out. And also one thing I got to be mindful of here is that she has some eyelash, which is actually not part of the shape of the eye, so I need to slightly acknowledge that while I'm working with this. And then basically, if I want to wrap this up here, I can just grab these two verts and I can merge to center and do the same thing with that one. So edit mesh, merge to center. And so then I can start going in, I can start making additional edge loops to help create more of the contour that I need for the eye. And I can do this a little bit rough. I don't need to be super exacting right now. But that gives me the ability to quickly go in and start shaping where the general eye socket is positioned. I usually select verts, and I do most of the editing that I'm going to do with vertices rather than with edges or faces or anything like that, because I usually find that tends to work a bit better. I get a little bit more control over where things are getting placed. And because we're in an orthographic view here, I'm looking at the front view at the moment, I can be sure that if I just kind of click and move the vert, moving it in 2 dimensions so it doesn't produce additional complications. Okay, so I've got a basic idea of the outline of the eye here. Now there's a few different ways that you can try to tackle the actual making of the eye. I'm going to go with a really simple method. First of all, I'm just going to turn on, under Create, Polygon Primitives, I'm going to check the box for Interactive Creation. I'm going to select a sphere, and I'm going to drag out a sphere that's roughly somewhat close to the size of the eye. I'm going to quickly rename this left eye just so I can track it. And I know that an eyeball is always going to be larger than the actual opening. So I just want to try to look at roughly how big the eyeball appears to be in this context. And it's probably going to be pretty big. She's a little bit of like an animated style character. So I also want to make sure that I'm not using too many polygons for the eye. So I'm going to go ahead and just a polysphere. I'm going to change this from the subdivision axis to, let's say, maybe like 12 and 12. And that'll probably be okay for right now. We can do something a little more complicated, but I think I'm just going to basically smooth this, or smooth the display of the model so that it looks better. So I'm going to go to Mesh Display and go to Soften Edge, and then that way we have a little bit of like a soft-edged eye model. And I'm going to go ahead and hide this. I'm going to hit Control H to hide that piece. But let's go ahead and actually make sure that we're matching this up roughly where we can on the side view. And I probably could have actually done this a little bit more easily with the fewer edges first. But let's go ahead and so I'm going to position this basically roughly where it looks like it's kind of in that position. Then I'm going to grab these corner verts. I'm going to slide them all the way back to where the eye actually is represented on the side view, and I'm going to keep doing that with each of these, just sort of gradually, roughly get as close as I can to matching the shape here. And it looks like I can actually grab all of these and I can kind of position them a little bit further out. And I can also grab the bottom verts and I can slide those out a little bit too, so that it matches the contour of the eye that we see here. So it looks like we're getting something in the ballpark at least. And so what's cool about this is that we can continually make edits to this as we go. So like as we keep working with this piece, we're definitely going to want to keep looking at it in both the 3D view and in the orthographic front and side views to make sure that they are generally conforming with what seem to be natural shapes. And because this is done by hand, obviously, there may be tiny imperfections in either the way that I'm placing my verts or where the eye was positioned in the sketch or what have you. So usually you strive for making it like 100%, but that's not always realistic to actually try to achieve. So it's okay. So it's pretty close. I think we're doing okay here. What I usually do to just kind of close out the eye is I select all of the edges right around the actual eye socket itself, and then you can just extrude those edges. So if I hold down the Shift key and scale inward, I can basically extrude all those edges to kind of a point. And then I can go to select Edit Mesh, Collapse, just to like explicitly make sure that those are a point. And I can just pull it back a little bit so that we can have the room for the eye socket where the eye will essentially be overlaid or inset into, so you can see roughly where the position of the eye will end up. So I'll go ahead and hide that for right now, though. And then what we can do is we can start making other sections of the face so that we can work with this. I usually like to make the main anchor points on the face first, so that'll be like eyes, nose, and mouth. And then I can go through and actually, since we turned on interactive creation, those will be a little bit easier this time. So I'm going to go ahead and drag out another plane here. This time I can assign existing material, and I can use the character base material. And my goal here is to just roughly make the shape of the mouth, and I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap so that I can so that we could assume that potentially we could make the mouth open and close. So I'm not going to actually attach these together. I'm going to leave them separate pieces. So I'll extrude that out. You can extrude that out as well. Looks like I accidentally double extruded, but that's okay. And also, anything that comes right up to the center, you can be kind of meticulous about this by saying I can select this vert and I can type 0 on the X, and that will make sure that all of these verts are aligned exactly at 0, 0, 0, which makes it a little bit easier to mirror parts of the model in the future. Then we can go through and we can start doing some insert edge loops to add a couple more divisions here. Because the actually, you know what? Let's not go ahead and do this insert edge loops just yet. No, let's actually position this in 3 dimensions first. So I'll select the entire object, slide it forward here. Then we're going to make sure that we go ahead and grab the verts for the far corner of the mouth, slide that back, make sure we're making the exact shape of the lips, relatively speaking, so we want to make sure that those are close to the shape. And then I also know that I'm going to have to actually move these verts farther forward. So let's go ahead and do this one. And then we'll be adding in dimension here, because we obviously know that each of these is varying degrees of accuracy based on what we're looking at currently with the lips. Let's see. So I think that actually what this looks like, it's going to be in need of some additional tweaking. So so let's go ahead and let's make some additional divisions in the front now. So I'm going to go ahead and insert edge loop, insert edge loop, insert edge loop. And then I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to insert an edge loop that goes all the way around the middle. And you can tell, because we kind of circled these all around, that we actually have the ability to do that in a way that affects the entire shape. And I can actually just start by just grabbing that edge loop that we created and just sort of pushing it out a bit so that we get a little bit more shape, a little more contour. Now at the far end is the part where we want to have the least contour there. This is by the way, this is why you want to make sure that, like, 'cause it looks like there's a little bit of difference between these. So I won't give my wife too hard a time because she did this for free. But yeah, those are the only things that you want to watch out for when you're working with templates like this. Is like, are these 100% accurate or not? And sometimes they may be, sometimes they may not be. So let's see. So I'm just going to try to roughly get, as best as I can with these to make them smooth while being fairly accurate. Okay. Okay, so we've got a basic idea of the mouth here. I want to make sure, again, all these verts are at 0 on Z. Let's go ahead and put together the nose really quick. And actually, the nose can be easy or it can be hard. I think what I'm going to do, it really depends on like the actual character itself. So I'm going to draw a plane very quickly that roughly follows the overall placement of the nose. And then I'm going to position it in the side view. I'm going to grab these verts, and I'm actually just basically, I'm going to start by focusing on the main bridge of the nose. So, okay, so we've got that there. I can go ahead and I can select edges, and then I can hit the control key to subtract the side edges there, and then I can extrude this back. And then I can maybe grab the main model itself here. I can go to Insert Edge Loop tool. And I know that although I'm just clicking here, that it's actually adding edge loops. So I can switch to Vert and grab each of these and sort of like position them roughly where I want them to be, so that it kind of follows the shape of her overall face. And then I know that, like, because we've got the little bit of nostril here, I know I'm going to have to start moving this out. But let's go ahead and actually just focus entirely on one side for right now. So I'm going to go to Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop Tool. I can do this a little bit by eye. If that's okay. I'm going to select face. I'm going to delete all the faces on this side, select all the verts, and then just type in 0 on X to make sure they're all positioned where I want them to be. And then I know that I'm going to be doing a little bit of shaping here. It looks like that's probably, I don't want to overlap with the shape of the eye. And I also know that because she probably has a fairly small, fairly pointed nose, I'm going to grab all these verts on one side. Actually, probably don't need the outliner right now. And I'm going to start pulling those back a tiny bit. And again, if I'm ever trying to get an idea of what this actually looks like in 3D, I can also take a look at that there. I imagine I'm going to need a couple more divisions to bridge this, and I'm probably going to want to shift the edge of the eye here over a tiny bit too, so that I'm not encroaching too much. So let's go ahead and make sure we've got just like the basic shape of the nose here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to actually extrude these edges here. So hold down the shift key and drag. And I need to use those somewhat to start positioning the shape of the nose, but I also need to make sure that the nose is a little curvier, so we don't have a really extreme shape for the nose. And let's see. Well, maybe we can sort of massage that stuff a little bit too. I think in this case, I think we'll be okay. Now I'm trying to avoid actually moving the middle verts off from the actual middle of the face. Now this is something where because we have kind of a nostril that does extend a little bit away from our face, and it doesn't directly conform exactly to the shape of our face. I want to try to position these verts so that they roughly match the contour of the shape of her face minus the nose. So not trying to respect the nose too much. And then what I can do is I can also basically, I can grab these faces here, these two that I've created. I can just sort of extrude these faces out. And then in this scenario, we can kind of adjust and massage the shape of the nostril to try to get something that looks a little bit like what we would expect. So, this is something I can conceivably take a very long time to do. So I'm going to try to do it quickly because I don't want to focus the entire tutorial on just doing like the nose or something. But yeah, so we have the ability to start positioning these so that we can get the little bit of like the bulbous section of the nose with the nostril section, and if we need to, then we can also utilize this to essentially extrude. We can extrude the nostril out, or in rather, so that we can make it look like it has a little bit more dimension to it. But for right now, I'm not too worried about that. I think that I just want to go for like the main shape, and I think that that's actually working reasonably well. It looks like it's pretty close with what we got here. Maybe we'll go ahead and tweak a tiny bit. And of course, just to make sure that we have some consistency, we also want to assign existing material, character base mat, just so that we know we have that. And if we need to, we can also make the character base mat a little bit less translucent, right? Just so we can see a little better where that is while still being able to see through things. So I just want to make sure all those things have the same material applied. Okay, sure, cool. All right, so we've got a basic set of details for the face, but let's go ahead and I think it's also a good idea in a lot of cases to kind of define the shape of the chin, because that is one of our guiding principles here for the face of the character. I'm actually going to model the whole underside of the head roughly to what I think will make sense, and then we'll tweak that a bit as we go. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to assign existing material, character base mat. So I'm going to have a little bit of a strip here, and then I'm going to grab the edge, and I'm going to extrude that all the way out to where the ear is. And then basically what our goal is here really quickly is to just go through and make sure that we have that base shape here. So and then we can go in and we can start adding details, adding divisions. It looks like we're going to need to have a little bit more explicit shape than we currently have. So, but that does give us an idea of roughly what the 3D dimension is by combining those two. So I'm going to start by doing this in the side view. So I'm going to insert a few edge loops. And we also want to make sure that we're sort of generally trying to follow the overall shape of the chin. And I know that I'm going to end up adding another edge loop for some density. So let's make sure that we're actually following her shape correctly, as close as we can. Okay, and so then she's got, let's see, maybe that will end up needing to be tweaked a little bit to make sure that we've got like the right shape of her jaw, so that when we get into the full 3D view, we'll have a little bit more of an idea of what's happening. But for now, she's got kind of a little bit of like a sharp jaw, got kind of a pointed forward jaw, essentially. So I'm okay with that like small inconsistency there. So it's hard to get a template to be like totally 100%. So okay. Then let's really quickly make a basic shape for the ear, and I'm going to try to do this as simply as possible. I'm going to do in the side view, create a plane. I'm going to extrude it or just drag it out so it's roughly positioned at this kind of opening here on her ear. Then I'm going to select edges, extrude this out. Again, we were going for kind of low poly details, so nothing too crazy. And extrude the last bit there. Now remember that this the ear, there's parts of the ear that are connected to the chin and parts that are not. So let's go ahead and now that we've got that there, let's go ahead and just position this here. But because ears have kind of a flat contour to them, what we can do is let's go ahead and quickly hit the insert key. I'm going to hold down the V key and I'm going to snap. Let's see, sort of to avert there. Actually, maybe I'll snap to. No, that's probably fine. Then hit the insert key again. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that that vert is positioned in the side view like this, exactly, or roughly exactly where I want it. And then I'm going to kind of rotate this out and rotate it into position so that more closely matches the shape of the ear here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly grab all of the outer edges here, and I'm going to extrude those edges so that I get kind of a side piece going off of that. And so some of this will need to tweak a little bit, but in general, the idea is that then I'm going to basically be merging parts of that into the face while having part of it be extending out separately as a separate part of the ear, since we have the kind of lobes and all that stuff that we need to factor in as well. So the one thing I think I'm going to do here is I know that the lobe is probably not going to continue all the way where basically the ear meets the head. So I'm going to go to Mesh Tools, Target Weld. I'm going to make sure I don't have too many verts selected. Go to Mesh Tools, Target Weld this one, Target Weld this one, Target Weld this one. And then I'll deal with bridging the gaps on the other parts there in a little bit. So, okay. All right, and then the last main bit that we need before we can start sort of bridging the face is that I want to have an idea of what the overall extent of the head is. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this one edge here, and I'm going to extrude this edge up. I'm going to try to flatten these out a little bit, just so that because I know I'm going to need to use a few more in the long run. So I'm going to select this edge, and basically I'm going to start just extruding to roughly follow like a general idea of what I think the shape of her head is, not including her hair. And that's going to take a little bit of interpreting because I don't actually 100% know exactly where the shape of her head ends relative to her hair. But then I'm going to go down the neck there. And then basically we're going to end up kind of merging those together when we wrap this all up. So I think that's a fairly well, let's see. Actually, I think her forehead looks like it extends a bit out from here. So that means she probably has a larger head here. So I'm going to go ahead and insert edge loop, insert edge loop, insert edge loop, and insert edge loop. And then I can just start nudging these to improve the overall accuracy of the shape of the head. And again, it's going to be kind of funny because she's a cartoon character, so I may not be 100% accurate with her head. I would have had to pay a lot more money for this piece to make sure that I got like the X-ray projection of what the head would look like. And then I can also do the same thing roughly with like the chin area here, is I can extrude the end of the chin, and I can extrude that all the way back where the neck is. Then I can extrude that down to the base of the neck. And in this case, I'm just going to try to follow roughly where her main body is. So, and that one is yeah, that looks like that's roughly somewhere around there. Okay. And so I've got a basic idea of like what the general form of her head and face are. And basically now the next part is that we need to go through and we need to turn this face into a complete face with all of the different pieces connected and attached and having the correct volume, and I need to make sure that I do that in a consistent way as well. So that'll materialize a little bit as we go through the process of creating each of the different components. So we'll do that in the next part.